Welcome back, everyone. So now we are going into taking a little bit of a turn for a different session. We welcome Dr. Allison Roy, who will share the neuroscience of stress strategies for parents and caregivers. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Roy, who is a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of New Hampshire and trauma expert who has devoted her career to the study and treatment of traumatic and chronic stress. Dr. Roy began her career in community mental health in the United States, gaining a sincere appreciation and understanding of systemic mental health care. She then went on to practice in both the Czech Republic and Singapore, seeing clients with diverse cultural backgrounds from more than 30 countries. After returning to the United States, Dr. Roy spent more than 2 years as a psychologist for a partial hospitalization intensive outpatient program for adolescents, focusing on crisis stabilization as well as family and group therapy. In 2009, she joined Dr. Cassie Yackley, promoting resilience and post-traumatic growth through their nonprofit, the Center for Trauma Responsive Practice Change, whose mission is to facilitate the creation of a trauma-responsive system of care for children and families in New Hampshire. Additionally, Dr. Roy has her own practice in Exeter, New Hampshire, serving youth, families, and schools. Aside of work life, Dr. Roy enjoys being with her young family, hiking, and training for her next ultra marathon. Thank you, Dr. Roy, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. All right. Shall I share my screen and get us started?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. So, hi, everybody. I am so honored and pleased to be here today to be able to share some hopefully really, nice, validating, helpful information with you all. We're going to talk today about the neuroscience of stress, and don't let that, don't shy away from the big brain part. I hopefully will break it down for you and really help us understand from a neurological cellular level what happens in our brains and bodies when we are stressed. And then hopefully give you some strategies as well as, I know we have a mixed audience here today. So whether or not you're someone who's in the field of mental health and the system of care in the state of New Hampshire or beyond, whether or not you're a caregiver, an educator, you're a human first and foremost who cares for at least yourself and usually someone else, right? Most of us are spouses or partners, some of us are parents, we have colleagues, we have friends, and what we're going to talk about today is applicable to all those roles you play in your life. And that's what I love so much about what we call trauma-informed care or trauma-informed systems of care. So my hopes for today, right, this conference is all about hope and holding on to hope coming out of a very difficult 2 years. And I think that's a really great title and place to start from. And so my hopes for today are first and foremost to provide validation that this is hard, that life is hard, that caregiving is hard, that being a human in a global pandemic is hard. And there's reasons why it's hard, and hopefully I can help you understand that today or gain some more appreciation for that today. The second hope I have is to arm you with knowledge, and that is really the primary strategy to take away from today, is this knowledge that helps you to understand the whys, that helps you to understand when you're seeing someone in your life behave or act a certain way, that you then have the science or the brain, knowledge to be able to say, what else could be going on for that person in this moment? Whether it be someone in the grocery store, your own child, someone who is, really angry at you in traffic, whatever it is, this knowledge gives you this beautiful lens to be able to see the world in a different way. So really, I hope that's the primary strategy that I'm able to give to you all today. I'm certainly going to share some strategies to help you move beyond the why to the what now, right? That's always kind of the question I get when I work with school districts, when I work with first responders. Okay, I get it. Now what? Now what do I do about it, right? Because we're helpers. We're in helping professions, or we're caregivers, we're parents. We want to take that information that we've been given and then fix it, right? To problem solve, or to make it better, or to go to the next step. And so I'm hoping to give you just a little bit of that today. And then certainly I want to be available for questions throughout, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end as well. If there's anything, that you thought, oh, I'd like to just have some clarification on that, or more information about that. Sharing resources is something I love to do. So I was even doing it with the panelists before I came on with you all today. So certainly, if you have questions about resources, I'm here for that as well. So we're going to start here today with this is my family, and we don't always dress like this as Star Wars characters, although it'd be really awesome if we did. But this was at Halloween, and this story takes place in Halloween of 2020. So if we can try to put ourselves back there and what the world was like back in October of 2020. I share this story and I kind of start us off this way for a few reasons. One is because the word vulnerability is incredibly important to me in my work and what I try to teach others. In that I see vulnerability as a place to start from when we've experienced something really hard. I see vulnerability as a strategy, as a skill, right? Play is vulnerable. Talking about hard things makes us vulnerable. Apologizing is vulnerable, as a vulnerable act. So there's lots of parts of today, of strategies from today, that I'm going to share that are pretty vulnerable. So it's a challenge out there for you to be able to take what kind of what we talk about together today, and be able to see how can I be more vulnerable in my life and use that as a strategy. So I'm demonstrating that. I'm practicing what I preach, right? And starting in a vulnerable place with you all with this story. The other reason I share this story is because this is a strategy and a skill that I learned from this story, because I didn't get it right. So I am, as Liz said in my introduction, I'm a trauma expert, meaning I've taken my career as a psychologist and really focused from the time I was in graduate school, getting my doctorate, on post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. That's my area that I've spent a lot of time researching and treating in. And I'm a parent and a human, and I don't always get it right. So even though I'm immersed in these kind of practices and knowledge and strategies all day long, right? I talk and do professional development and do therapy all day long. And with my own family, I'm mom first, and sometimes I don't get it right. And in this particular story, when I didn't get it right, it actually provided a beautiful opportunity to have a repair. And that's really why I'm sharing it with you, is to kind of see how sometimes you're going to get it right, and that's really powerful. And sometimes you're not going to get it right. And how do you take that and turn it into something that is still a beautiful birthplace of learning and love? So that being said, so October 2020, we had a divide in our household, like many people did. So my two younger kiddos, my boys, were full-time in person in school in October 2020. My daughter, my oldest child, was full-time remote at home with us. So we already had kind of this balancing act, right, of these two worlds, and the ups and downs that came with both. And the Friday before Halloween fell on a weekend that year, my two boys were getting dressed in their Halloween costumes and getting ready to go to school, and kind of have what, as much as COVID allowed, have a fairly traditional looking Halloween at school. My daughter, who was in first grade at the time, was told not to wear her Halloween costume on her Zoom classroom, which totally made sense, right? 28 first graders wearing Halloween costumes on Zoom is chaos. And that morning, she was having all the behaviors. She was irritable, she was unkind, she was kind of tantruming even as a first grader. She wasn't being kind to her brothers. she was tearful and shutting down. And I remember that morning looking at her as her mom and saying, Claire, what is wrong with you? Right? This is what we do as parents. What is wrong with you? What were you thinking? And we're going to see why those questions, don't make sense to a brain that's in distress. And so I said, wow, Claire, what's wrong with you? And of course, she didn't have an answer for me. And so I get all my kiddos in the car to bring my boys to school. And we turn on the car, and the Michael Jackson's Thriller, that song, comes on the radio. And my daughter said, oh, this is the song that we do at school every year. Now, this is true. So my kiddos go to a very small elementary school. It's about 100 kids, K through 5. And every year they do a Halloween parade for parents. And at some point during the parade, the lights go out and the kids drop to the floor and the music comes on, the Thriller song, and the kids have learned the entire Thriller dance. And they are so excited to show the parents. So it's really fun as parents. It's doubly fun as parents that of 1st through 5th graders, because the kindergarten parents have no idea what's happening. So it's really fun to watch their reactions as well. So she was right. This is a song that they did. And that's when I had my aha moment that morning. And I had what I have since then called the pause. Which is what I hope that I'm able to give to you today, this ability to have the pause. That moment when I realized that I missed the cues of a stress response, that I missed what my daughter was actually going through that morning, that I missed that she was having these behaviors or these symptoms because, of course, she was sad, she was angry, she was frustrated. She didn't even really understand why she was having that reaction, but she had all those big feelings because she felt like she was missing out, and frankly, she was. Kiddos don't have a really good ability to connect, and some of us adults don't either, be able to connect what they're feeling to some of their behaviors, right? She wasn't able to say to me, oh, I'm really irritable this morning because, I'm actually really sad that I'm not going to school in my Halloween costume. And I missed it, right? I even missed it as an adult. And so in that moment, I said, oh, Claire, are you sad you're not going to school this morning? And she started to cry. And that's when I knew I had hit it on the head. And sometimes you're not going to always hit it on the head the second time either. And that's all right. You're trying. And so I was able to apologize. I'm sorry I missed it. I didn't judge myself for it, because that's the part that's really important. We tend to judge ourselves as parents for missing it or getting it wrong. Don't do that. Allow yourself to have that mistake and grow from it. And then we talked about all of it. We talked about, how do we make today special? How do we move forward differently? And helping her connect those behaviors she was having to the feelings that she was having, so that she begins to develop that skill, that she can then carry into adulthood. So this pause, this ability to have the knowledge that we're about to talk about, and have that insight or that awareness or that reflection, that reflective moment, when someone around you in your life isn't at their best, when they're not able to, regulate for a stress response. So hopefully that's what we are able to talk about today. All right. So does this look familiar? Any of these things? And when I was putting together these slides, I picked this graphic of these lollipops very purposefully, because first of all, I love it because it's just, it's eye-catching, but also because we all have different reactions, even sometimes to the same stressor. So that's one of the first things I want to make sure that we're, kind of thinking about today is, just because we maybe come from the same family, or are cut from the same cloth, doesn't mean we're having the same reaction to a stressor. So all my family members have had a very different reaction to the past 2 years, and very different symptoms are coming out. So we're going to understand why that is today. But these lollipops kind of represent the spectrum of different reactions to stress. Some people are oblivious or avoidant. Some people are kind of don't really know or uncertain. Some people are quite angry or shut down. So this might be an option. So do any of these things look familiar for either yourself, your spouse or partner, your own children, or those kiddos that you work with or adolescents that you work with? sad a lot of the time, withdrawn, not really wanting to go to school or even interact socially with others. This is what we're seeing a lot of right now. Truancy is at an all-time high in the state of New Hampshire. Adolescents especially are having a very difficult time kind of integrating into social settings. Frankly, adults are too. So heavily involvement in the online world or community, social media, crying or mood swings. So you might be seeing some of this. You might be seeing this, and this is kind of what my daughter was dealing with that morning, right? Irritability, anger, yelling, kind of snapping, slamming doors, punching walls, storming off, sometimes even just physical agitation. So not being able to have a calm body, feeling kind of fidgety or needing to get energy out. And we're going to understand why there's a very biological reason why this is happening. There's certain processes that are happening in our brain and body that are making this happen, or just even some eye rolling, attitude, irritability. Or finally this, and a lot of these kind of symptoms that I'm talking about right now are certainly symptoms of a stress response, but they're also what I'm hearing from educators and mental health professionals right now is what we're seeing in very high levels. So this is also data that I've been collecting, talking with different groups and hearing, from, this school year, what's going on for kiddos. So we're seeing difficulty with even beyond what's developmentally typical, right? We don't expect kids to have full concentration, attention, and focus that adults have. We don't expect them to have the impulse control that adults have or empathy. Those are all skills that aren't developed until we're about in our mid-20s. However, this year, coming out of this pandemic, we're seeing those skills be behind a little bit. So being able to follow directions, stay on task, have impulse control, just be able to kind of follow routines at home or in the classroom. Kiddos are needing more reminders. They're needing more help staying on task or needing more help concentrating and attending. So hopefully some of these are resonating with you all. Hopefully some of these sound familiar. There's some things you're experiencing either at home or in your professional world, and they make sense. So we're going to talk about why that's happening. But first this. So this is a statement I don't think I can say enough right now, especially coming out of the last 2 years. What we're seeing is a completely normal reaction. And in other words, it is exactly what we would expect to be seeing based on an abnormal situation we've all been a part of for so long. So I just keep saying this to whoever will listen, completely normal reaction to an abnormal 2 years. Normal doesn't mean we want it to stick around, doesn't mean that we don't have strategies to help make it go better. It just means that it's not something that we wouldn't expect. It is something that we would absolutely expect, meaning all those kind of symptoms or behaviors I just showed, all what we would expect to be going on for us based on what we've been through in the past 2 years. Okay, why is that? So let's get to the why. Let's get to that knowledge piece. So it's a couple different things. It's multi-layered, really. So global crisis happens, right? March of 2020, and everything shuts down. I'll never forget Friday the 13th, right? March 13th, getting that kind of call that school was going to be off for the next 2 weeks. Little did we know that school would be off for much longer, that we would have to do many more weeks before we would quote unquote flatten the curve or try to stop the spread. So this global crisis happens, but so many other things have happened since then. There's been the financial crisis. There's been social and political unrest, right? We're divided more now than we ever have been. There's things happening abroad that are very stressful and that impact our stress response system. So there's all of this happening, never mind what's going on for you in your own unique situation in your own world, right? Everyone has their own perspective of the last couple of years, their own ups and downs, challenges, hardships. And just to know that there's just been a lot of stress floating out there in the world, whether it be coming in through your personal experiences or coming in through the news media, social media, neighbors' stories, school stories. So we get bombarded with information. And that all, even if it's not happening to us directly, it still impacts our stress response system. So keep that in mind, that still impacts that. But there's also these two layers. So there's this feeling of unsafe and uncertainty. So feeling unsafe is something that many of us frankly took for granted prior to March of 2020. We didn't often have to question, am I going to be safe going to the grocery store, having a cookout with friends and family, going to school, doing my job? These are all things that we had to navigate. Our brain had to use energy to navigate. So just kind of keep that in mind as well as we're going through what happens to our stress response system when it gets overwhelmed or overtaxed. And then there's this final layer of uncertainty. Our human brains are problem solving machines. They're very efficient and effective at it. We all solve problems differently, but at the core, we are there to solve problems, to reduce our anxiety, and to make us feel more comfortable. When there's something that's uncertain or there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, our brains don't like that at all. That's actually the number one threat for our brains and our stress response system, because it's the ultimate problem that cannot be solved. And a lot of what's happened in the past 2 years is just that kind of constant uncertainty. So our brains are having to kind of question constantly and do things to try to make things certain. In other words, like look for information, do lots of internet research, kind of grasp at straws, make a million Google searches. So we do all these things that actually agitate our stress response system when the whole purpose of what we're trying to do is to make us actually feel less stressed. So that uncertainty layer has been a big one as well. So all of this is happening, not to overwhelm you, but all of this is happening in our worlds in a way that we've never experienced before. Children and adolescents and young adults are not immune to this. They were experiencing it as well. Their adults were experiencing it as well. We're going to see today why, even if you did all the right things to, protect your children from the news media, to have healthy conversations, that if you were stressed, there's a part of that your child's brain is picking up on. Pesky mirror neurons that we have in our brain interfere with our ability to keep our stress to ourselves. So there's a part of that too. So just one more factor about this is that we as humans are designed to get through extenuating circumstances. We call it our surge capacity, our grit, our ability to really grind it out for a limited amount of time. That's one of the really difficult parts of this pandemic, is that it's been going on for a very long time. Typical natural disasters happen. There's a cleanup. There's a surge of resources coming in. The rebuild part can happen. We can move forward with problem solving and clean up and rebuild and moving forward with our lives. This global pandemic hasn't had that. It's required us to surge or really pull from our grit part of our brain for far too long. And that causes extreme fatigue. It causes, just our stress response system to be overworked for a very long time. So sometimes when I start a presentation, I feel like the first 15 minutes are super heavy, and I'm sorry for that. I just want you all to be validated in the fact that this is really hard. There's a lot going on. And the beautiful part about human brains is we have that capability of neuroplasticity. So I say all this because this shaped our brains to get where we are today. And we can get back to where we were because our brains, our neurons, they do what we tell them to do. And so we can reshape and retrain our brains to get back to where we were. So that's what this holding on to hope part is, right? We can hold on to that because it's real. We know that post-traumatic growth and brain development and neuroplasticity, those are all real concepts that existed far before COVID-19. So we're going to be able to not only help ourselves, but our kiddos as well move forward in a more resilient way. All right, so let's talk about this stress response system that I keep alluding to. We're going to break it down into 3 parts to the human brain. Obviously, you have far more parts to your brain. However, these are the parts that are very implicated in the stress response. And for our purposes, help us to remember, different parts of the brain that are online when to use which strategies. So, and just so you all know that my slides will be shared. I'm also, available for questions, like I said. So, please, make sure that you know that I'm a resource as well. I also have a website. I'll share that at the end. Also a great resource. I share stuff on there as well. So, okay, stress response, human brain. So when we're very, very stressed, when we have something happen to us that's overwhelming, when we just have a lot of day-to-day stress building up, and for kiddos, the bar is pretty low. So even a change in routine, something new, something different, even a birthday party or a celebration or something can cause their brain to go into this red part. So we as adults have a little bit more capability to stay regulated, most of us. Kiddos go down to the red part very quickly, very easily. So that's why they need so much of adult help regulating their brains. So when we're really stressed, we go into the survival part of the brain, and we're going to look at this in a minute. So that part of the brain is the only thing online, and its only job is to keep its human alive. So it's constantly asking, am I safe? The next part of the brain, if you're able to kind of calm that red part of the brain and open up into the blue part, what we call the blue part of the brain, we get a little bit more groundwork to, ground to work with. That part of the brain is really all about feelings and emotions, and it's really looking to other humans to make it feel loved and safe. So it's, yes, am I safe? And can I use other humans in my world to make me feel that way? The final part of the brain is the green part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that's responsible for learning, for creativity, for consequences. It's not online if we're stressed. We don't have access to this part of the brain, right? Under stress, we regress, is what we like to say. So what can I learn from this is not really a question a kiddo can ask in a situation where they're having a behavior that's impacting others, unless they're calm. So we're going to take a deeper dive into this. So what we're talking about when I say the stress response system, it's really about fight, flight, or freeze. That's our very biological reaction to stress. Yes, it's a biological reaction to trauma. It's also a biological reaction to everyday stress. There's just different levels of it. And so you probably feel what this feels like when you're running around the house trying to get ready in the morning and you can't find your keys. This may or may not have happened to me just this morning, actually. I started to sweat. My heart was racing. I was kind of shaking a little bit. I was like, I have got to go in the next 5 minutes. I need to find my keys, right? So this process starts to kick in even when we're just experiencing everyday stress. So even when we're just experiencing everyday stress. So what's happening in our brains when we're feeling that way, when we're feeling that pressure? Our amygdala, which is a tiny little structure in our brain, I like to think about it as a smoke detector, the smoke alarm. That comes from Bessel van der Kolk, he's at Harvard, and he's definitely a leading researcher in the area of PTSD. So the amygdala is our smoke alarm. It is scanning our environment very frequently, 3 times a second if you're not stressed. So if you're at rest and you're just at baseline, 3 times a second. If you're keyed up, if you've had a stressful life, if you've had a trauma experience, your amygdala is 10 to 100 times more active than that. So very, very active little structure. It's scanning our room. It's scanning our thoughts, our feelings, our body reaction, our trauma triggers. It's scanning everything. So I like to use the example of if I'm sitting here, talking to you all in my home office, and I catch a spider out of the corner of my eye crawling across the floor, my amygdala is going to sound the alarm just a little bit. And I'm going to try to quiet. I'm going to try to use all my skills to keep calm, right, in that moment. And I'm going to have half of my attention, because my amygdala says so, to that spider, which it views as a life-threatening thing because I'm got a phobia of spiders. So your amygdala is reacting to all sorts of sensory information in your environment, and it's doing so to keep us safe, right? This system that I'm talking about, well, annoying when we're talking about stress, we don't want this system kicking in and interfering with our day-to-day lives. We do want this system kicking in if you're, for example, being chased by a bear. This is a beautiful system that we as humans have to keep us alive. So amygdala is working. If it detects something like my spider, it starts a process, a cascade of actions and reactions to happen in the brain. Sometimes, like I said, the actions are little, sometimes they are big, right? If you're being chased by a bear, your brain's probably having a fairly large reaction. So it activates the red brain for action. It says, all right, red brain, this is your show. I'm shutting down green and blue brain. I'm not giving you access to that because those aren't important right now. I just need you to survive and get through this situation. So the green brain and most of the blue brain come offline. Our memory processes shifts, so our memories become very sensory based. So we aren't going to really focus on this part today, but just to give you a quick example, if you're in, for example, a car accident and you have a commuter mug full of coffee in your kind of cup holder, and during that car accident, that coffee spills, the smell of coffee might become a trigger for you, a trauma trigger, and you might not know why or remember, right, the story as to why that happened, but that smell was remembered. Because when we're in this mode, memories switch to sensory memories, not kind of story-based or language memories. And then we lose our words. We don't have very good ability to have access to the left part of our blue brain specifically, which is responsible for language. So this is why you might not be able to remember a phone number or address if you're trying to do it quickly when you ask it. It's why when you ask your child, what were you thinking? They can't answer you when they're really stressed or going into that red brain. It's because we don't have access to those areas. Now, when I say we don't have access, I've seen the brain scans. They're pretty telltale. So when, and you'll see it today, actually, in one of my videos, you'll see what it looks like. When a brain is active on an MRI, it lights up like a Christmas tree. There's all sorts of lights happening because those neurons are firing and wiring and all going all crazy. If there's no brain activity happening, it's just dark. And so I've seen this happen where the green and the blue part of the brain are just dark when someone's experiencing stress or trauma. So we're going to watch a quick video. I show a lot of my videos certainly as information, but also as a resource. This is a great one if you work with or have an adolescent, or even a very, like a middle schooler or older elementary school kid. This is a great one to start to have them begin to understand their own stress response. I have a YouTube channel. I save all these videos that I do in my presentations to a playlist, so you can certainly access them all there.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact. We're going to break it down using a visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, fold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason. Bringing your lid down is tough for all of us. We'll dive further into that next.
We too will dive further into that next. So that's just another kind of little quick visual of what we're talking about. Is this amygdala is great in life-saving situations, not so great when it's stressed because it's been overworked and overused for the past couple of years, and it's responding big and frequently to every little stressor. So Last bit of science here, last bit of knowledge, right? This is our first real strategy, is just having this knowledge, and you can see how having this would cause those pauses or those reflective moments to happen, seeing things just a little bit differently. So this is the polyvagal theory of the stress response system. This is a well-known theory. You can definitely Google that and get lots of good resources on it. I really like this way of looking at the stress response, and it connects the brain part that we just talked about to the real life symptoms that I kind of talked about quickly on those lollipop slides. So we as humans have these 3 zones available to us. We have the middle zone, which is the optimal zone of arousal, or our rest and digest. This is optimally where we would spend most of our time. It's where every body system, because all our body systems are so tied up with this stress response system, right? The amygdala is connected to every kind of part of our body. So from our respiratory to our stomach, our digestive process, to our sweat glands, everything is all connected to this amygdala's response. So at rest and digest, our body systems are at rest, right? Our heart rate is even, our blood pressure is where we want it to be, our respiratory, our breathing is slow and even, and we are quite literally able to digest our food. So one interesting article I heard recently on NPR was that doctors, primary care doctors, are prescribing antacids and other dietary digestive aids rather at an alarming rate right now. And that is not surprising to me at all, because if we are not spending any time or little time in this zone, our digestion is going to be very disrupted by stress, right? We've probably all felt that too. So we have this optimal zone. I'll say one last thing about this optimal zone. What we've seen happen over the past 2 years is that zone has gone from, I hope everyone can see me. I talk a lot with my hands, guys, I'm sorry. So it's gone from here to here. So in other words, that zone that used to be, much bigger is now our tolerance is much smaller. Same for our kiddos and adolescents. So their distress tolerance, or ability to manage or tolerate stress and distress, is shrunk. And so we're getting pushed into the other 2 zones more frequently and more easily. Again, it doesn't mean that we can't re-expand that zone. So that's the good news. That doing some of the strategies we're going to talk about today will help to open up that window of tolerance once again, so that we can spend some more time there. So if our amygdala sounds the alarm, we get pushed into one of the other 2 zones, either the hyperarousal zone at the top or the hypoarousal zone at the bottom. So let's start at the top. That's hyperarousal. That might be the way that our body chooses to go. We have the ability to go either way as humans. Some of us can go one way more than the other. When I talk about this at the end, you might be like, oh, I'm definitely more of a hyperarousal person. Kiddos tend to very frequently go between the 2 quickly. And we see sometimes when they have this hyperarousal response, and then they'll do this swing around and come back down to hypoarousal. So we see both happening for people. So hyperarousal at the top is fight or flight. This is when the body releases adrenaline and cortisol and other kind of chemicals to help speed everything up, right? Our heart rate, our respiration, our blood pressure goes through the roof in order to survive by fighting something off or running away. This is not the way you want your body and brain to go if you're being chased by that bear, right? We do not want to try to fight the bear or run away. So hopefully your body chooses the other direction to go to. Fight or flight is helpful in those situations, though, that, for example, it's how people lift cars off kiddos or babies, right? You've heard these amazing superhuman stories. It's because they've got all these adrenaline boosts rushing through their system. It's a very powerful drug, and again, can help us to survive. It is not helpful to have all of these chemicals being released if you're an 8-year-old trying to sit in math class. That's where we're going to see that physical agitation. We're going to see yelling, irritability, or we might see the opposite reaction. But this is what happens when we see kiddos look like they have ADHD, look like they have pediatric bipolar disorder. They're having these big behaviors or symptoms happen because their stress response is very, very active. So what about the bottom response, that hypoarousal response? That's when the body slows everything down. So the opposite, right? Your blood pressure plummets, everything slows way down in order to survive by freeze mode. So think about an ostrich or a possum, those animals that kind of curl into a ball. This is where we see avoidance, we see withdrawing, we see checking out, we see kids pull hoodie sweatshirts up over their head and not want to engage. They get kind of prickly, right? Their prickles show, so that we'll leave them alone. We see kiddos space out, have a hard time concentrating, seeming like they're not kind of present, right? You might kind of wave your hand in front of their face. We see robotic compliance, meaning they're going to yes you to death to get you to go away, right? They're avoiding everything. They're just going to say yes until you go away. The ultimate hypoarousal response that I actually saw in a few of my clients when I worked in that partial hospitalization program that I worked in for teenagers is passing out. And there's actually no medical reason for it other than this ultimate hypoarousal response. The body is overwhelmed by stress or something that's happening in the environment, and it just causes a loss of consciousness to just escape. Or we'll see dissociation in this kind of zone. So this is that shutdown zone. So these are the two opposite ways that your body tends to react to stress. And again, it's a kind of a spectrum. So we might see a very small reaction of just withdrawing and kind of not wanting to get out of bed for the day. Or we might see a really big reaction like losing consciousness or passing out. So there's varying degrees of that. So this is just another graphic. This is a cool company that creates these infographics and allows us, people like me, to share them. I just thought this was a nice visual to be able to kind of see what this polyvagal theory looks like in real life, right? Is someone who's at rest and digest is in the middle there. Hyperarousal is on the left with running away or just wanting to, get out of that situation, being physically agitated. Hypoarousal is on the right. We're shut down, curl into a ball, disengage, cry. Looks like depression. And we all have differing ways of responding. So we're going to watch a quick video here because all of our amygdalas are different. And again, just because for those of you that are caregivers that have children of your own, I have 3 kiddos actually of my own, and they're all completely different and they all have completely different amygdalas. Just because you're related doesn't mean that all the parts of your brain look the same, and that's including your amygdala. So that's why you might be saying, gosh, we just had this traumatic event happen or this stressful 2 years, and one of my children seems fine. What's wrong with the other one? They're totally falling apart. So just think about the differences in amygdala, and this video is going to kind of show that. And think about, what you choose to do for a profession, right? There's some of us that seek stress, that seek high stakes situations. There's other of us that know I would never want to be a commercial airline flyer, right? I would never want to be working on the stock exchange. Those are jobs that would completely stress me out. But some people need that feedback in order to have a balanced brain chemical reaction happening. This is one of those people. Some of you might be familiar with Alex. This is from the documentary, his award-winning documentary, Free Solo. He is, and you'll see right in this opening clip, and if you are afraid of heights, I apologize in advance. This movie is a little bit sweaty to watch if you are afraid of heights. He rock climbs with no ropes. And you'll see that, like I said, right in the beginning, he's a tiny red dot on the side of a rock face, and he has no ropes. So most of our amygdalas, I should say, would never allow us to get where he gets on the rock, right? We would be frozen. Our amygdala would just press the freeze button and say, no way, Jose, are you going up there? So his amygdala is obviously very different than most of ours. So it's just a nice kind of visual or way of looking at how the differences can occur and how that causes us to react differently to stress. I hope it provides insight. It also provides validation. If you feel like you've been impacted more than other people over the past 2 years, maybe your amygdala is just more sensitive than others, and that's okay. We tend to do this comparative suffering thing as humans where we say, but I don't have it as bad as the next person, or what's wrong with me, or it's just part of my job. Why can't I do it? And so hopefully maybe this gives a little bit of insight as to, why all reactions are okay.
I think all the soloing he's done has trained his mind. He doesn't get emotionally affected by it the way that a lot of people do. And not knowing about the science of that is that's probably a product of your past more than it is just a genetic thing.
There's been a lot of speculation about like how I deal with fear and like how I'm able to free solo. People are just like, oh, well, he must be a thrill seeker. There must be something defective. So when the writer contacted me about doing an MRI, I thought it's kind of cool just to go get an MRI and like see what's actually going on. You know, scan your brain and then see if it's all there structurally.
We're gonna start the task now. Remember to press the button every time you see a new picture come up, okay?
Okay. We'll see, maybe it turns out I'm some kind of freak creature or something. I've had several ex-girlfriends say that I had like personality disorders or things like that. There's something wrong with me. Emotionally stable. Agree. Ingenious, a deep thinker. Disagree. Tends to find fault with others. Agree somewhat. Climbing a steep mountain would be too scary for me. Have trouble controlling my impulses. Is depressed. Is my brain intact?
Your brain's intact, and it's quite interesting. Those little two dots that are further towards the top of the screen, that's the amygdala. So an interesting thing, you have no activation in your amygdala.
There's just not much going on in my brain, it seems. Do you think my amygdala actually just doesn't work or something?
Your amygdala works, it's just that it needs a much higher level of stimulation. Things that are typically stimulating for most of the rest of us are not really doing it for you.
Maybe my amygdala is just tired, you know, from too many years of being all gripped.
So for him, it's a combination of nature and nurture. I think he was born with an amygdala that was undersensitized, and I think he's also shaped it to be even more undersensitized, would be my guess. And this last part of this knowledge piece is, how do you find yourself as either a caregiver, spouse or partner, professional, responding when someone else around you is having a stress response? This part is really important to reflect upon. What do you say? How do you react? Even more importantly than those two things is, how do you feel it happening and what do you feel happening in your body? So hopefully you just take a moment after today to kind of reflect upon when someone else around me, whether it be my child or another adult, is having a big stress reaction. How do I respond, and how can I work on giving myself maybe some self-care or some self-regulation so that I'm staying regulated in the presence of other people's stress? So if all of that's going on, and it's been going on for a couple of years now, right? We're kind of at this kind of point, this turning point, hopefully, in this world. And it's a point where, here's my favorite word, right here, a point where I feel like we're at this place of coming in between these two definitions of vulnerability. So when I say that word, some of you might think of the dictionary definition of vulnerability, of a place where you're left exposed or liable or susceptible to or subject to, sensitive to hurt or wounds or further damage. And certainly coming out of the last 2 years, that's where a lot of us are, is feeling this kind of stripped down. I've had some really difficult moments. I could, I don't know if I can take any more stress. And looking towards the future, this holding on to hope of this other definition of vulnerability. How do we move forward coming from this place that actually allows and gives us the room to move forward differently with empathy and accountability and authenticity, and hopefully the rest of our time together today, we're going to look at how to do that, how to take this vulnerability and move towards this vulnerability. And by the way, this right-hand side definition is from Brene Brown, who you'll probably learn throughout today. I really enjoy and respect. Speaking of enjoying and respecting, Dr. Bruce Perry is another expert that is absolutely at the forefront of research in post-traumatic stress disorder. He wrote this book right here, The Boy That Was Raised as a Dog. really good read about childhood resiliency. Not an easy read, but a good one. And he said this recently, and this is what I've been using as my mantra for this year, this school year. I work a lot with schools and varying school districts around New England, and I keep reinforcing with them that this is our mantra this year. We got to regulate first. We have these little brains that are coming to us and looking for help with calming down. We have to regulate them first, and with our relationships with them, and build those relationships with them so that they have the ability to have ongoing regulation, and then they can get to learning. None of the learning part can happen until we do the first two steps, until we do some regulation for ourselves as grownups, for the kids around us, and build those relationships and our ability to flock, and address that concept right now before we can get to that learning piece. Because as we now know, as you all now know, we can't do learning unless we have the green brain online. We have got to regulate the red brain, relate to the blue brain before we can even get to the learning piece that comes from the green brain. And what I'm really talking about here is this word that I think everyone is very tired of hearing. And that's actually why I bring it up, is it's resilience. I've heard this year, so many times that kids are resilient. It's okay, kids are resilient. They're gonna get through this. That is true. Kids are incredibly resilient because of their nature, because of their brains, because of their neuroplasticity. They have more neuroplasticity than we as adults do. And they cannot be resilient on their own. They need well-regulated, healthy grown-ups to be able to be resilient with them. So when I started talking about resilience, and I had a couple of the school districts I've been working with for years now say, gosh, we're so tired of hearing that word. I thought, why? Why is that happening? Why has this word become kind of a negative word right now? And so I did some research into why that was happening just for myself. And I came across a really kind of interesting, just thought, is that resilience, I think, was being used to replace grit. So resilience isn't how many times you stand back up, or you fight through, or you get up when you've been knocked down. That's really grit. We as humans, like I said at the beginning, we have that. As Liz said, I'm an ultra marathoner. We definitely have to pull out some grit when we're out there. We're out in the woods for hours and hours. And that's not, that's how we can get through life with just grit. That's only made to be used in very extenuating circumstances. Resilience is really about how many times when we're knocked down, how many times we reach for someone else's hand who said, hey, I'm here with you. I'm going to help you through this. I see that you're having a hard time. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to be turned away by your difficult emotions. I'm actually just going to help you move through them. I'm not going to problem solve for you. I'm not going to take them away. It's not about taking away the difficult emotions for our kiddos. It's about helping them see that they too can tolerate them with the right people around them, because we're herd animals. We're meant to do this together. So that is really what resilience is. And I hope that what we're going to talk about right now will give you some of the strategies or tools, or even just knowledge, to be able to build that resilience in your children, or the children that you work with, or the children that you are surrogate caregivers for at some point during your day. So we spent the first part of our time together talking about fight, flight, or freeze brain, right? This stress reaction that we have. And those are certainly F's that our brain looks for when faced with a difficult situation or a distressing emotion. And there's a fourth F, flock. We are, as humans, like I said, we're made to be with other humans and use other humans' brains. In fact, we're neurologically wired that way, as we'll see in a minute, to calm down, to regulate, to even just look across the room and say, are you seeing this? Am I seeing this? Are we in this together? This is what flocking is all about. If we can create flocking for our children, and we're going to go through a couple steps of how to do that, it gives their brain the other option to fight, flight, or freeze. Certainly, we want them to have that fight, flight, or freeze reaction, right? We just don't want it to be happening day in and day out. We want them to, or we don't want it to be happening up, huge. The ideal is that they go to flock, or that if they go to fight, flight, or freeze, they're easily brought back to flock when one of their healthy, well-regulated grown-ups is able to be with them. So let's look at that response. So now we're moving into social neuroscience. If you haven't picked it up already, I'm a total nerd. I love the science part. I love the brain part. And so why not keep going with it? So social neuroscience, how flocking is actually calming. So let's look at a couple of terms really quickly that help us understand why this flocking thing actually works at a cellular level. So we're going to look at attachment, attunement, and co-regulation or flocking. Similar, it's kind of same. So attachment is all about from birth, actually starting in utero, humans learn how to regulate with other humans. So we look to other humans for our survival, and we actually do this for far longer than many other species. So we look to our flock when we're distressed, when we need our basic needs met, right? It starts right from the get-go with a newborn. They do different cues and triggers to have their adult flock around them take care of them. And that's how they begin to build this process of attaching to other humans and being able to use other humans for this flocking process. So it starts right away. And so then it moves into this attunement and safety. So our safety as young children is absolutely dependent upon our caregivers' ability to make us feel safe, cared for, well-regulated. We feel safe when our caregivers accurately read our cues and meet our needs for regulation. So this doesn't mean 100% of the time. It doesn't mean every time, right? I know as a young mom, there were many times I stood over one of my three babies and said, I don't know what you need right now. I've tried everything. And yet I'm still giving them the signal that I'm here and we're going to figure this out together. Even though I'm not getting it right now, we're going to figure it out together. We use our caregivers as a secure base. So what begins to happen through attachment and attunement is this process of creating a secure base. I have this picture of, you're probably wondering why the flock theme is here, but also why this mother duck and ducklings are here. This is a really nice visual of this concept of secure base. So if you can think about a mother duck with her ducklings out in the world, they kind of waddle away from mom, right? And they're kind of picking at the grass and they're exploring. They might even pop in the water a little bit. But if something scary to them were to happen, like a loud bang or a clap, or a human comes over, they do this. They go right back to mom and go right up underneath her wing. That's a secure base. That's what we do as humans as well. We begin to explore further and further and further from our grown-ups with the knowledge that because I've formed this attachment and attunement and safety with that grown-up, that even if I'm out in the world and something distressing happens, I can flock back to them and have them get me out of that fight, flight, or freeze mode. But we can't do it alone, right? As if I'm talking to you caregivers and parents out there, right? Our hope for our kiddos is that they learn how to then generalize that ability to other adults. So they we have this little world of secure bases, right? So I'm a secure base for my babies, but then also their teacher might be, or a friend, one of their friends' parents might be, grandparents certainly. I've heard of a story of a school bus driver being a secure base for a child and being actually invited to his special ed meetings. So cute. School lunch lady, same thing. School cafeteria staff. So all of these secure coaches, secure bases out there in the world. So we start to generalize. So even if mom's not right there, or dad or grandma's not right there, we are able to have a secure base in wherever we are in our world. Then as adolescents, we begin to use each other as secure bases. This is developmentally appropriate and needed, and sometimes causes adolescents to not make the best decisions when they're with their other secure bases, right? They start to flock with each other. And this is where groupthink and some bad decision-making happens. But It's not only developmentally appropriate, it's also good practice, because when we're adults, we also use each other as secure bases, right? We have colleagues, we have friends, we have our spouse or partner. We have other adults out in the world that we use as our secure bases, as our flock. So this flocking concept starts in utero, continues through our lifespan, can be started at any point. So even if a baby or an infant has a very disrupted kind of relationship with primary caregivers at birth, that this can start at any point. And this is why I work so hard with educators in our system of care, is because they are often a secure base, sometimes the very first secure base that a child is experiencing. So how does this magic of attachment and attunement and secure bases happen, right? It's our magical human brain, mirror neurons. And this is my youngest son, who I was telling the panel before you all came on and joined us. It's his birthday today. He's turning 5. So my baby's not a baby anymore. He's my youngest. But what we're doing in this photo, that's why I picked it, is a really nice kind of demonstration of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are neurons in this kind of front part of our brain that talk to other human brains without using any language at all. They have their own language, but without using any language at all. They pick up on nonverbals, on facial expressions, body language, all sorts of communication that isn't done through verbal or written language. So they allow us to have the power as humans to emotionally resonate or feel with another. This is why when you watch a movie, even if you don't know the character, even if you don't know if they're a real character, right? It could be a completely fictional character. You might cry with them, you would laugh with them, you feel for them, right? Even watching that short clip of Alex, you're like, oh God, please don't fall off that rock. This is what allows us to have that very human capability of empathy and compassion, is these mirror neurons. So they're pretty cool and they're pretty powerful, but they need real life human interaction to be able to work efficiently and effectively. Whew! Don't put those two words back to back, guys. So someone asked me, and it was a great question in the WOVA app about technology and how it interferes. And so this is part of that answer. We'll get to another part in a minute. Technology is a great gift that we've all been given over the past couple of years, right? I'm able to work on a regular basis once a week with Fairfield, Connecticut School District. That would not happen. I mean, maybe, but I would be doing a lot of driving. So amazing things are happening. And we know, because of course researchers get all sorts of research done when something like this happens, a global pandemic, and we're forced onto Zoom. Do our mirror neurons work on a Zoom type platform? The answer is yes. Again, they're just not as effective or as efficient. So it takes twice as much energy from our brains for our mirror neurons to work in a Zoom type platform. That's why online webinars are sometimes so exhausting. So I'm sorry, guys, instead of actually an hour and a half today, you're spending 3 hours with me. It's actually twice as taxing on our brains and bodies. And they're not as they're just not as effective. So that's efficient. They're not as effective. You can't see, I told you I'm talking with my hands. Sometimes you can't, right? I'm talking with my hands right now. You can't see them. So you can't see my whole body on here. Your mirror neurons are kind of cut short. You're not able to see everything that is going on for me, or limited to this tiny little square. So if adolescents are spending a lot of time on social media, talking, texting, communicating via the web, even on live chat type situations like FaceTime, their mirror neurons are not developing at a rate that we would want them to. They're doing things differently. They're developing differently. Their skills are going to be different. Their ability to tolerate social situations are going to be different. Not to mention that our brains are made to take in the social information of a flock of about 20 to 30. If you're allowing yourself to be involved in online communities, you're multiplying that by 100 to 1,000. Our brains aren't meant to take in that many differing social opinions. So it's really a lot. It's a lot of information. It's different information. It is changing the way our brains look, our brains kind of process information. So we just want to be really mindful of using this as a tool and a resource, but not having it be our only way of human interacting. I just have a quote on here. This is not from this photo, but my daughter once said this to me and I thought, gosh, this is her mirror neurons at work. Mommy, your words are nice, but your face is mad. And so it's just, again, not only is it a good example of mirror neurons, it's a nice example to show that kids are always watching and they're picking up on way more than we often, even I give them credit for, right? So here's your 3 terms. This is a review. Attachment is a child being able to say, you keep me safe, caregiver, person, secure base, and you help me to believe that there are other secure bases out there in the world for me too. Therefore, I don't need to go into fight, flight, or freeze. I can have the availability of flock as a tool for myself. Attunement is you see me, you understand me, right? A child's able to say that to an adult. Yeah, you see me, you get it, you understand me, and you help me to begin to understand myself. And that story I shared right up front, right? Me being able to say to my daughter after we had our repair, you know, I wonder if the way you were kind of responding this morning was because you were actually really sad and mad that you weren't going to school. So really being able to attune to her and understand and reflect back to help her to begin to understand herself. This is particularly powerful in trauma situations. Trauma is all about not being seen and not being heard. And so when you are able to give the opposite response to someone, I see you, I hear you, I understand what you're going through, it's a pretty powerful reparative message. And then flocking. You see, a child's able to say to an adult, you see when I'm upset. And you help me to calm my brain. And there's different ways to do that. And sometimes it comes down to just staying calm yourself. So before we go into some steps to flocking, this quote comes from, and I got some resources here I wanted to be able to share with you all on camera. So this comes from Brooklyn Rainey. She is a New Hampshire native herself as well. She was an administrator at a school in New Hampshire and then decided to take some time off and write a book. And she's got some amazing resources and she's just an absolutely lovely individual. I really enjoy her. So I love this concept because sometimes we feel as parents or as caregivers or as educators or as mental health professionals that what we're doing isn't enough, that we're just a drop in a giant bucket and we're not actually going to make a difference. And so I love this because we know we are, right? Deep down, we know we are. And sometimes hard to recognize that. I like this quote to kind of help us wrap our heads around and have a good visual of how us flocking with young people is really, really helpful. So young people are like disco balls. They spin and reflect what surrounds them in their world. And so they're looking for those reflections and they're picking up different pieces. And so to be able to be a healthy grown-up out there, you're going to make one of those little squares that you see on that disco ball. So let me just, before I go into the next part, let me just share, she has these Ripple journals for middle schoolers and for high schoolers. She also has the book that quote comes from, One Trusted Adult. And her message is all it takes is one trusted adult, or all it takes is you being that one trusted adult in one young person's life. If you think about this mental health crisis that we're now in, and I hope all of us recognize that we are truly in a mental health crisis right now coming out of this pandemic. And I see that, and I try to see ways towards a solution. And in my experience with working with systems of care is the mental health professionals we're not going to be able to do this alone. We're not going to be able to come out of this alone. We need every person that comes in contact with a young person to be able to have the knowledge, to have the pause, to be able to look at things differently, to stay regulated and calm, and be able to say to that young person, I see you. I'm not going to shy away from your difficult emotions. I'm actually just going to sit here while we move through this together. And the more of us are able to do that, and the more times we're able to do that, the more little squares we're going to put on each child's disco ball of healthy, well-regulated flocking responses that they all need right now. that's my call to arms, guys. So hopefully spread the word. We all need to be these supportive humans in children's lives, whether you're a first responder, a mental health professional, an educator, or a caregiver, it doesn't matter. We can all do these skills. So how do you foster your flock? And whether it's your flock in your home, your flock in your neighborhood, your family, your school, it doesn't matter. So how do you foster that flock? Just as a reminder, what flocking is for is to begin to address these symptoms that we see in red brain, right? The little brains down there as a reminder. When we're in red brain, this is what we're going to see or hear from children. Just as a reminder, lots of tantrums, difficult feelings, difficult reactions. We're going to see sleep problems, falling asleep, staying asleep, tummy troubles. We're going to see, shutting down, disconnecting. We might hear them asking a million bajillion questions. Sometimes that's just a sign that they're starting to go into red brain. Kids ask a ton of questions or ask repetitive questions, even though you've answered them 3 or 4 or 5 or 6,000 times. Again, all responses that we would expect to see in a red brain state. Just a moment on temper tantrums. I hope I get to change the way you look at, view, and respond to temper tantrums today. This is my middle child, and he is absolutely having a temper tantrum in this moment. And it was so cute. I know it seems a weird thing to say, but it was very cute. It was Christmas Eve. And despite the fact that he had been a part of making, decorating the cookies for Santa, putting them on the plate, as soon as they got down to his level in front of the fireplace here, he had a massive meltdown because the cookies were not for him. So again, his green and blue brain were fully online when we were making the cookies, but as soon as he couldn't have one, he descended down into red brain and had a massive tantrum. So prior to me really studying the stress response, as a parent, I fully followed the ignore, don't engage, don't give attention to tantrum strategy. And sometimes it worked after a long drawn out process. Most of the time it wasn't that effective. And so when I started doing this research, I did a lot of research into tantrums, and what's actually needed during a tantrum, it's a red brain response, right? It's a kiddo saying, I'm in distress. Even if we as grownups are saying the reason you're in distress is ridiculous, and most of the time it is. That doesn't matter. To them, it's a real brain body reaction. They need red brain strategies to get them to come out of a tantrum. Ignoring is actually going to send them further into fight, flight, or freeze. When we see the tantrum stop due to ignoring, it's often because they're having a freeze response. They're just going to be compliant because they don't know what else to do. They want your attention back. So I use it. This is a great visual, but I use the example of my youngest son, whose name is Finnegan. He's just as fiery as his name sounds, and can throw down with the best of them. When he was about 3 years old, he wanted a popsicle. I said, sure, buddy. So I opened up the freezer, but we only had red popsicles, and he wanted an orange one. And so ensued the tantrum. In my brain, my adult brain, I'm saying, well, this is insane and ridiculous. And this is just red popsicles are delicious. I don't know what the problem is. But I had to sit down on the ground with him. I had to get low and slow, as we call it. I had to say, I'm really sorry, buddy. I know you really wanted an orange popsicle, and all we have is red ones. And I'm sorry that you're so upset. The tantrum stopped. He got up and he went on with his day. That is not giving into the tantrum. Giving into the tantrum would be finding him an orange popsicle with pulling out all the stops. Okay, let's drive to the grocery store. Let's get you, or how about this? How about this? How about this? It's not giving into the tantrum. It's giving the red brain what it needs. That's what flocking is all about, is the strategies are to give the red brain what it needs so you can move forward differently. Okay, a moment about technology and teenage and adult temper tantrums. So many adolescents, I work mostly with adolescents. That's my area of expertise, trauma, adolescents, and working with families. And what I hear a lot is, but my phone is my coping skill. So I also was very interested in this concept because I was like, but it doesn't work. So phones can be coping skills for healthy brains. phones can only be coping skills for healthy brains. What happens when we pick up a phone or technology or involve ourselves in technology when we're in red brain is we're actually just distracting from soothing the red brain, so that when we put down the phone, we're still in red brain. And so this is why we're seeing teenagers have massive reactions when their phones are taken away. It's because they haven't done anything to soothe the distress. They've just avoided it. And so when they take the phone away, they think they're tantruming because they think they're upset or they're having that reaction because you're taking the phone away. It's actually because they've never moved out of red brain. They have to do other regulation things first before they can then use their phone to help finish that regulation process. So technology isn't all that regulating. It's actually just being called the human pacifier, the adult human pacifier. And I completely agree. It doesn't actually do anything to rewire or regulate our brain. A lot of regulation is actually brain neuronal activity being rerouted. It doesn't do that. It just avoids us engaging in the upset until the phone is gone, and then the full-blown red brain returns. So how do we actually flock? So we're going to go through these 4 steps fairly quickly. Again, the biggest strategy I want you to take away from today is that knowledge and being able to look at someone who's in distress differently. But certainly these are strategies as well. The first 2 are on my website in more depth. The second 2 are coming. So we will talk about them today, but then certainly if you need more information, they're referenced there as well. Also, just I want to mention another free event that I'm doing, put on by Merrimack School District. It's also on my website, the link to register. It's a screening of the movie Like, which you actually can't get access to unless you're some sort of organization. It's a quick movie. It's about 50 to 60 minutes, perfectly appropriate to watch with your child. And then we're going to have a panel discussion after. So really great resource, really great event that Merrimack School District's putting on completely virtually. So from the comfort of your own home, watch the movie, have access to it. It's about digital technology and the impact it's having on us and our young generation, and then be able to have a panel discussion after. The last thing I will say about technology, I'm really passionate about technology, guys. I could go on for hours, but the last thing I will say is to also be aware, and it fits into these foster your flock steps as grown-ups, you know, and it's laughable because my mind's right here, I can pick it right up. We have to be aware how much time we're spending eye contact here. What we're seeing in the research, and my young doctoral students that I teach are keeping me kind of aware of this, is what we're calling technological neglect, meaning a generation of kids that are growing up with brains that look like they've been neglected because their caregivers are spending so much time here. And that's, again, because the mirror neuron, our brains aren't getting the feedback they need if we're not making eye contact. So to take these 4 steps and really engage in life and be able to embrace that. And I know it's hard because so much of our work now is here. So just even to take very small breaks, because step 1 is making small connections. And I truly mean that, because you have such a beautiful, secure based relationship with your child and the children that are in your care. You can make very small connections and have them have a huge brain impact. So it doesn't take much to regulate out of red brain when you have a relationship. 3 to 5 minutes is all you really need to make a connection in some way, to have a goofy dance party while you're waiting for water to boil for dinner, to take 5 minutes away from work just to build a choo-choo track with your child, to color, to play, to be vulnerable in that way in very small bursts. Gives kiddos' brains what they need to say, wow, look, we're having an engagement and my brain feels safe because of it. We know why now, right? We know the neurons are there to allow us to have this as a human capability. And that gets me to this word bored, another word that kept coming up this year, and I had to do some research about, and it was fascinating. So only about 10% of the time when kids say I'm bored, do they actually mean I need something to do. 90% of the time they're saying, I actually just need you. And they can't, again, this is where their underdeveloped ability to have insight and connection to their feelings and body reactions. So they're actually feeling distressed. And what comes out is, I'm bored. So it's okay to encourage them to keep going, to embrace the boredom, to embrace the creativity that comes out of boredom. It's also okay to combine step 1, taking a small moment to connect, with step 2, engage in their world. So here, instead of I'm bored, here, I need you, and say, okay, well, let's take a 5-minute break and race around the house. Let's take a 5-minute break and color, or let's do let's see what we can find in 5 minutes for a scavenger hunt. Whatever it is, you don't need much. And this gives us that perfect opportunity, excuse, or reminder to engage in step 1. Step 2, you got to deepen your bench. We can't do this alone. In fact, Brene Brown has a great podcast on the 50-50 myth. It's not about being 50-50 with parenting. It's about how much do you have to give today, and who can you call in when you don't got it? And it's not always human. So sometimes we have a great flock around us that we can call on when we're feeling sick or tired, or we just have to do our work. We can't be available. Sometimes it's what I like to call grace givers. What can we do to give ourselves a little grace? Is it ordering dinner? Is it maybe we don't do, soccer practice tonight? Maybe we need more time to spend as a family. Maybe it's using Ziploc bags. And I know that sounds ridiculous, guys, but I really dislike Ziploc bags because I know what they do to our environment. And there's sometimes I just can't bear to wash out another tiny small snack container. So Ziploc bags are sometimes my grace giver. And so to have those things that we just call off our bench and we use and we don't judge ourselves for. I'm racing towards the end here. I always am racing towards the end. So give you the last 2 steps to flocking, and then we'll end with a nice quote from Mr. Rogers. Yes, Mr. Rogers, who was so trauma informed before we even knew what that was. Step 3, this one is, I am super biased to this one. My young family and I spend lots of times in the woods. Let the outside in. But there's a very large range of research to support this. So much new research coming out, and you don't have to go deep into the woods to get the benefits of being outside. It's just stepping out into that fresh air, breathing it in. And it's only 10 to 50 minutes. So even just 10 minutes outside, that's actually a new study that just came out, said just 10 minutes. Can really help to regulate our brains. We see the neurons firing differently. We see the red brain neurons firing, like lighting up and saying, all right, I'm engaged now, I feel calmer. Our blood pressure lowers, our cortisol level, stress level, hormone levels lower. The research is strong, powerful, and really cool. So those are my 3 kids, by the way. They are big hikers. And so we like to spend lots of time outside. The last step is one I've been kind of alluding to all day, is just to be able to apologize. That's hard. I know it sounds silly. It's hard as grownups to apologize to kids. It's something that it takes a lot of vulnerability to do, and just talk about all of it. I'm a therapist. I do a lot of family work. Like I said, most of what I do with families is allow them space to have really difficult conversations. And a lot of the healing takes place within those difficult conversations. So just being able to talk through, this was hard and I need to say that out loud. And finally, for today, here's Mr. Rogers, and this is why relationships and you all and your flock are so important. Anything that's human is manageable, and anything anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be made more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. And the people, hey, here's where you all come in, that we trust with those talks, important talks, help us to know that we're not alone, that we have a flock around us, and that we can get through this in some way. Here's my information, and certainly there's some on the WOBA app as well. I believe I'm going to stop share and just see. I don't know if there's any questions. We have a couple minutes. Of course. Of course. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking care of young people.
So it froze. Technology.
Oh, I know. I could, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So let's see, I just wanted to, let's see, there was one question here on the Whova app. What are your recommendations on interrupting the stress response in a positive way when both the child and the adult are having a stress response?
Yeah, that is wow, what a great question. I've never
Right?
been asked that before, but that's a great question. Absolutely. And this I felt this, and probably there's a lot of people nodding their heads right now. Sometimes it's identifying it, it's naming it in the moment. Whoo, mommy's having a moment. Man, I am stressed out. I am sorry that I am not responding the best way. We're having a hard time right now, aren't we? Any language like that, that just labels what's going on in the moment. And then I love movement. So, and actually it's not just that I love it, and I'm biased to it. So even just moving your body in any way, push-ups, sit-ups, yoga, let's take a movement break of some kind, because the research is really there that begins immediately to engage that red brain and start to calm down. Talking about it in the moment is really difficult, as we now know, because that language center of the brain is not really available. So being able to regulate some other way first. So identify, say that you're noticing it too, because sometimes we take for granted. So say that you're noticing it too, and that you recognize it, and that you're sorry that things aren't going well. Let's start over. Let's move our bodies, anything like that to kind of just start that conversation. Temperature is also another great one. So using some form of temperature change. Let's get a breath of fresh air. Let's grab an ice cube. So what that does is it actually shocks that bottom part of our brain to kind of pay attention. Or heating pad, let's get a heating pad, because as we know, when we're in red brain, we're very connected. Our amygdala is very connected to our 5 senses. So using those to our advantage in some way.
Okay, thank you for sharing the pieces about boredom and temper tantrums. Are there any other things we should be looking out for as missed signs?
So the questions one is actually one that it was like an aha moment that I had. I did a parenting fail. I was putting my daughter to bed. You never bring up something at bedtime, right? And I said to her, "Oh, we have no school tomorrow." It was election day. We didn't have school because they use our school for voting. And she was like, "What do you mean we don't have school tomorrow? What does that mean for us? What does our schedule look like? Who's going to take care of us?" And so it made me realize in that moment, that's a sign that kiddos might be stressed out, and they're not saying it or not really having any other reaction. Getting really quiet and shutting down a little bit is another one. Certainly, that's a great question too. I'm trying to think of what other warning signs might not be as obvious. Time. So our sense of time is very connected to our stress response system. So if kiddos are asking lots of questions that seem strange, like how much more time is it tomorrow or today? What's today? If they can't remember what day of the week they're on, that is very stress involved. And we do this as adults too. We say, "Oh my gosh, I can't even think about tomorrow. I just have to get through today," right? Our sense of time is very impacted by stress.
Okay, what do you suggest when sensory movement self-regulation breaks at school stop working because the child doesn't have the mental energy to participate or doesn't want to be viewed as different?
Great question. So 2 parts or 2 answers I can think of quickly. One is to have whole class do it. So some of the schools that I work with have started implementing whole class movement breaks when the teacher notices 1 or 2 students is dysregulated, and just making it let's get up and move, or let's go outside, or one of the schools I work with does 10 minutes outside. You can also build things in. So allowing that student to whoever their special person is at school, this is a strategy I love, building in a meeting with that person sometime throughout their day, which is not behavior related at all. So every day at snack time, you go to see Mr. So-and-so and you get to have your special time. Or I love right at the beginning of the school day, you know what, I need to have you bring this down to the office every day if the principal's their person, and they get to have that special face-to-face contact with that person. Those relationships are very grounding. So those are the 2 things I see working. I have another educator that's a high school educator that starts every one of his class blocks with a 10-minute walk outside, no matter the temperature, and they're way up in Maine. So it is sometimes very cold, but just that movement, that fresh air we want to head off things as much as we can, because exactly what that question is asking. Sometimes kids don't want to engage when they're in the moment of red brain. So how do we try to, regulatory diets are just like all other diets. If we can build them in throughout the day, it helps to head off some experiences as well.
If eye contact is essential to build neurons, how do you do this with people who struggle to make eye contact or are on the spectrum?
Yeah, so that's just one way, although there is a lot of interesting research that's coming out right now. And I'm not, privy to all of it, but they're very much looking at what mirror neurons do and how they react in children and adults that are on the spectrum. So I think there's going to be more information to come about that. Same thing, someone just asked me this question, same thing about children who have ADHD, who actually have a difficult time kind of concentrating or attending to social situations. It's all about proximity. So even if you can't make eye contact, being in proximity with that person, doing simple light touches, hands on shoulders, high fives, fist bumps, different things like that, that show we're connected and we're engaging with each other in our worlds. And mirror neurons will play off each other, even if we're just in the same room with each other as well. It's just eye contact helps, especially not being here. So just being engaged in the room together, even if it's not direct eye contact, is helpful.
And so the last question, it seems, is do you provide consultation to individuals or family situations?
I do, and so there's information on that on my website. So whether or not you are looking for it for your own family, or I have had school districts reach out to me about specific kiddos or families, and I've worked with them on specific kiddos and families as well. And so either one of those kind of venues, yes.
Great. Okay, and let's see. Looks like there's one more here. Thank you for sharing the pieces about board. Oh, nope, I already got that question. So it looks like those are our questions. I do also want to say that in the chat, there is lots of things that are saying, thank you so much for sharing the information. So interesting, so informative. It was absolutely. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Dr. Roy, for sharing all of this with us. And we really appreciate you taking the time to inform our audience. So with that concludes the live sessions for the NAMI New Hampshire Annual Conference today, Hold On to Hope. As a reminder, there is an evaluation that will be emailed out to you at the end of the day. Please take the time to complete that. You can head over to the community boards and continue the conversation there. We will share Dr. Roy's slides along with the other things that she shared here today. I have lots of notes, so I can make sure to get those all in there. And then up next at 4:30, so I know that that's late, but that is okay, because that is a recorded session, one that you can watch on your own time. And I do highly recommend it. Childhood trauma and substance use, there is a way out. So please take the opportunity to watch that session on your own time. And we'll see you back here tomorrow morning. Thank you so much. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.